Day 8 of the August 96 10-day retreat in Springwater. What a beautiful morning. Altogether fresh. Is it the same cicadas humming? That already incites to thinking and comparing, doesn't it? It's humming and twittering and silencing. Heart beating, maybe imperceptibly. Breathing is more perceptible. Is it there? Not how one would like it to be there, but as it is, from moment to moment. Physical sensations, an itching nose and a scratch. They don't have to be named and known, all these things that are happening. They're there. In their newness and freshness this moment. Which does not compare or measure. Comparisons can be seen. The mind, in sitting and being and living quietly for a while, becomes transparent at times, transparent to itself, where thoughts arising are indeed visible, perceptible. And as some people have reported, they may not even link immediately to emotions because they're seen. That's the beauty of awareness, detecting thought arising, that it does not necessarily have to link with this whole mass of conditioning, which is our reactiveness. And even if it does connect, a thought connects with arousing a feeling of anger or upset or fear. Can it be seen in all simplicity, listened to, felt as it manifests throughout the body, together with chirping insects and a wide open sky of blueness and goldenness. So how affectionately can one look at what goes on in this organism? Affectionately meaning not condemning it, not finding fault with it, not wanting to be rid of it, or trying to keep it forever. Watching affectionately as one watches children play. This morning's question arises out of a group meeting yesterday. It was not the first time in this retreat that this question was asked, but it gave rise to a deep discussion, dialogue, if you will. looking at things. Here's the question. What are we sitting for? Why do we meditate? I've been doing it, says the questioner, for some 20 years with different teachers. And I want to know now, does meditation lead to enlightenment? I really want an answer. Does this question reverberate with most people here? Because we're never dealing with this person's or that person's peculiar question. It can come alive when it's seen as one's own question, even if it hasn't been voiced. If there is no question in oneself as one hears a question, as no problem at the moment of listening, still the question becomes one's own to look at and enter into deeply. How to begin? This has not been planned out. This is the beauty of a talk. It unfolds as we're listening and looking together with the help of hundreds of cicadas. And this incredibly fresh air here. What are we sitting for? What am I sitting for? Can we ask this of ourselves honestly? Sometimes one doesn't know how to be honest, in quotation marks, because all that comes to mind are all the learned and remembered and often heard reasons that one has been given and one has adopted. We've talked in every talk about this incredible ability of the human body-mind to live in its thoughts and concepts and feel quite at home there. Not all the time, but more at ease than this seeming difficulty to look at what is really going on this moment. We have developed this difficulty. Children don't have it. They do live in the moment very realistically, concretely in touch with what's in the hands and underfoot or under knee. One is still crawling. In one meeting I remembered one of my first telephone conversations with our grandson, a little kid at the time. He loved picking up that phone. I said, "Hi Ben, what you doing?" And he said, "I'm talking to you on the phone." Baffled me. Telephone conversations go in a certain way. Talking about anything but what's in his hand. So why are we sitting? And to discover if these are lurking around or coming in as answers, find out what is conceptual about it, what one has habitually called it and named it and talked about it. Can that be put aside once it is discovered as hiding something else? Why am I sitting? Is it because of ideas about it that I've heard, read, been told? That's good for me. That'll lead me to tranquility. And hopefully, eventually, to enlightenment. And what is that? Right this moment of uttering this word, so much used, so much written about. Right at this moment of a plain humming and breath flowing, words being uttered and heard. What is enlightenment? Is it another one of our cherished concepts? Is it? Can one discern what is an idea, which is an abstraction from what is going on and what may not even be going on? The mind at this moment may not be open and at one with the plane and hum and breathing, but feel itself apart, separate, isolated. Is that the case? Can it be discerned, felt? Not just saying I'm a separate entity or I'm no separate entity, because one has heard it ad infinitum. This seems to be in the beginning such a difficult shift from thinking about ourselves and dreaming about ourselves to watching ourselves neutrally, impartially, openly, discerningly. And yet, it happens. It is possible for human beings, ordinary as we are, to get in touch with what's really happening, including all of the ideas that crop up in the mind and have such a power to generate energies within this organism. Energies of inspiration, enthusiasm, or the opposite, dejection, desperation. The thought of attaining enlightenment can either be an inspiring idea, generating energies to get there, to attain it, to work hard. Or if one has worked hard for 20 or 30 years and does not feel that one has attained it, then the word may arouse feelings of guilt, dejection, frustration, anger, cynicism. It was an interesting phenomenon, interesting to a lot of us who were watching it at the time of leaving the Zen center, that a sizable portion of people quit sitting altogether. when it was no longer required, forced, or established as the means to an end. As a radical relearning has to happen for an organism that is goal-directed, like iron filings, lining up toward the magnet. And then the magnet is gone. Or what was established in the mind as a magnet. Because very often, as one came to a spiritual training center, there was a real, deep, genuine, non-artificial yearning, which then became overlaid with the structure of thought and goal and ambition to get there. So somebody said yesterday in a meeting, toward the end, after people had spoken about what is meaningful, choicelessly meaningful to them about sitting, loving it, the beauty of it, whatever was all said. One person said, thank you for saying this. This is really what years and years ago I came for. To just sit, to just be quiet, quiet with all the turmoil that very quickly unfolds itself. One may not have expected that, may not expect it. May come to retreat not for enlightenment, forget about that kind of thing, but I want peace and quiet. Or I want to heal, many people say. Heal from all the wounds and scars of my everyday life. And for many of us, coming to a quiet place with quiet people, sitting without talking or walking, moving about, eating and sleeping quietly. Anything but inner silence unfolds. What bubbles up with some diminishing controls is a lot of agony, a lot of pain and sorrow, emotions, problems one hadn't even thought about when one came, presenting themselves, impinging on the whole organism. And then what is the response? We've talked about it many times during these past days. The habitual response is, go away, I don't want you. Not this. That's not what I came for. How can I get rid of it? And maybe realizing there is no choice eventually, sooner or later, than to be completely with what's there. Not as an imagined sufferer for the sake, again, suffering for the sake of getting spiritual rewards. That's part of a story. But the moment we begin to suffer from the pain that is experienced, a story is involved, most likely. Poor me. What more will I have to endure? Or I will endure all of this because it's for my own good. If that story running and keeping the suffering and the sufferer going is discerned, it doesn't have to continue. That's the action of awareness. It takes the place of running stories revealing them and then just being with what's really there. Pain, agony, not the words, not the descriptions, but the actuality, which is so different from what we imagine it to be, that this becomes a revelation in itself. The pain, the fear, whatever, when no separation divides, no story spins around it, isn't what we thought it was, and is now free to do its thing and dissipate. If it doesn't dissipate, it doesn't. What keeps it going? Is there an interest or an impatience to watch that? So, coming back to the initial story, what are we meditating for? What is meditation for? Does it lead to enlightenment? Tell me. I want to know. My first response to this question was to say nothing and invite others to talk. Actually, I'm quite sure I use that word meditation very little, because it is so interwoven with loaded fantasy and ideas and knowledges. It's heavy. Sitting is a lighter word, less pretentious, if you will, more descriptive of an actual posture. Of course, we do use the word meditative inquiry, and it took us a long time when it came to formulating our title, our letterhead, when we changed our name to what was most accurate and descriptive and least pretentious. Actually, we never registered, if I'm correct, as anything but Springwater Center, but to not make it appear like maybe a spa or whatever all centers are involved in. We added this thing for meditative inquiry. Get that word in there somehow. Make it look a little bit more, what, spiritual? That wasn't the motive. Because meditative inquiry says something about inquiry. It says it's not analytical, it's not intellectual inquiry, which we're so familiar with, so habituated to. It's a new way of asking questions, namely meditatively, which in itself doesn't say much yet. One has to do it. It has to happen for oneself, sitting with a question and allowing it to unfold into the darkness of not knowing. And allowing bubbles of words or insights to pop up. Maybe another question pops up first. Is that why I feel the way I do, not analytically, but existentially right now? And then stopping. You don't clamor for answers in meditative inquiry. One realizes that this is an obstacle to the creative unfolding of what is really happening within one and outside one. But this has to be learned directly, maybe by trial and error, or by it suddenly happening on its own. A quietness that does not clamor for answers, but is present with what is there and reveals itself. So in such quiet, observant sitting, not expecting peacefulness to unfold, but letting unfold what will. At times there is utter stillness, and at times there's a rumbling or exploding of problems. Or just this subtle storyline running. How much I do want this enlightenment and the ambition that goes with it. This is very important for us to observe, not to say I'm not ambitious, I've put that down. Not ever to say anything like this, but say let's look at it, let's wonder about it. Maybe there's nothing this moment, but at the right time of interaction it may come up. I may hear somebody telling about an experience of openness or unity, and is there jealousy? We talked about it earlier, people mentioned it. Jealousy, and then a newly kindled ambition to get that too, to be as good as the other. I know all of that, I lived through it, and I'm sure everybody else has. And to watch it meditatively, which is not condemningly or condoningly, but interested in what does ambitious thinking do to the organism? Not analytically, but what does it do this moment? It generates energies. And with the energies, more fantasy or idea what I will be like if I get that. Doesn't it? Already arises out of that, but it keeps reinforcing that thought of me as an enlightened being. Does it? I'm not trying to convince you, me, I'm watching. This whole amazing process of ambition, which is highly praised in our upbringing, our school. There would be no Olympic Games without ambition. No gold, silver, and bronze. Certain sports would simply drop by the wayside, but maybe we would play more with each other. Games, for the sake of the fun of it. I always enjoyed ping pong most when we didn't keep score. Because then something else comes in, right? Elation at winning and the opposite. So to watch it and see whether this is so, that ambition reinforces the sense of meanness, which is the very thing I profess to try to go beyond in meditation. I want to be free of the me, and yet subtly, surreptitiously reinforcing that whole illusion. That it is a separate me that could get something like an enlightened state for itself. Once a moment of openness and non-division has dawned, can just be an instant. It's so clear at that moment there is no me to have it. It's at the moment when the me is at ease, at bay, quiet, out of commission, that our true being reveals itself effortlessly as wholeness and non-division among us. Non-division, no separation from trees and bugs and clouds and marvelous sunsets and sunrises. It's only thought which brings me into connection with the perceived that keeps giving new birth to the sense of I. If indeed it had obeyed for a moment. So why sit quietly or walk quietly in this room or in the woods, in the meadow, in the tent? Well, get a feel for the fact that any doing this for the sake of that is a distraction, is a dis-ease, an uneasiness, an upset of the balance. I want that means I'm not here. It's simple. Can it be seen simply? I do this for the sake of that needs fantasy to keep that going. And fantasy is not in touchness with cicadas and cool breeze. It's not so difficult if one is not in expectation of the spectacular. Conceptualized, described by writers. So, sitting for the sake of something else, it has to be discerned by each one of us. The cut-upness of it. And then asking again, what is sitting without an end in mind? Not as a means, but simple, unembellished by fantasy. This moment of listening, attending, not oriented or directed by push or pull. That takes real stillness and motionlessness. To listen to the motion. Because motion can only fully be detected when there is some measure of motionlessness. Because all our escapist habits are in the form of some motions, twitches, scratches, touching one's ear or mouth, scratching one's hair. And all of these urges, if agreed upon not to carry them out, one agrees to sit 25 minutes without all of that, that urge comes to mind. And if it's not carried out, what remains? Sometimes it feels like a wrinkle smoothing out. Into awareness. To the tune of a blue jay. if that's indeed what it is. So how attentive is the mind as it is sitting quietly, or is it riveted to a practice? To a practice. And I do want to say here, I do not want to interfere with people's practices if indeed they have brought them here. Nobody has mentioned it. Sometimes I ask just to be informed about each other. But to test it out for oneself, whether when the mind is riveted to a practice, it can afford to be quietly attentive to what is happening. All the subtle escape mechanisms or habit mechanisms. Not good, not bad. But if not taking place in attentive stillness, what happens? The energy that goes into habits just simply gathers without a tag on it. It's just there. And awareness is energy. Energy is awareness. I don't mean the inspirational energy from thoughts. That's anything but awareness. Even though it can come into awareness, we can become aware in a moment of stillness how an inspiring thought has triggered the chemicals in the body before we can say, boo, it's already happened. Or, as somebody reported, and it is so, the awareness is strong and stable, the thought may not commute itself into physical stuff. Then it just flashes off and on and off. And one may feel the body almost going into reaction, but it's not necessary because it's seen, it's felt, it's listened, it's heard, it's there. And it isn't there. We talked at length about it in a previous meeting here. How a thought or somebody's word or criticism or looks, the way they look at us, need not become the cause of an effect here if we're looking and listening attentively, interestedly. That's an amazing happening, even though so seemingly unspectacular. Maybe it's the most spectacular thing that can happen to a human being. Something not becoming the cause for an effect, but remaining whole, not with a new trace of memory. Is that possible to witness events within us or around us? Not indifferently, not with lack of compassion, but without the incidents becoming the cause of an effect here. That thought came up and we discussed it in one meeting about the posted execution of Frankie Packer. And when the email was posted that he was murdered, something in me stopped. It responded to that word. And I wondered whether that execution became the cause for an effect of more hatred or rejection not that one agrees with it. More stuff happening, because every trace of this kind wants revenge, or paying back. And that's not conducive to understanding, just to condemn the condemner. And I'm not saying that this is what happened, but the word gave me a start. First I said a stop, and then a start. How possible is it for human beings so wired, so conditioned, full of traces and patterns, to witness or be in the presence of things happening without adding to the chain of reactiveness? You could say right off the bat it's impossible because most of the time I react. But I don't buy that answer. I want to find out moment to moment, and if it hasn't happened until now, it does not mean it cannot happen this instant. And it's a very fine thing. It doesn't mean condoning murder or condoning execution or condemning it. It's something entirely different. It's being out of this world, right in this world. Not floating around like a saint with a halo. That's a lot of cause and effect stuff. Self-image, so forth. And it's not that this massive programming that is within this organism. We talked about the network before, network of conditioning, of memories, of connections, memory to anticipation and so forth. Not that it is possible to get rid of that. In attaining enlightenment, there's a hope for that. And then such disappointment or anger when one hears about a famous master who, in spite of being an enlightened person, so people tell me, has done this and that. How could that be? Well, how can it be to imagine that somebody has been done with all of the conditioning? It's this mind that creates these beings, these enlightened beings. It had nothing to do with reality. And if one finds out one doesn't want to see that reality, one clings angrily to one's idols and ideals, by which I'm not condoning what we're doing. So it's not a question of how can I get rid of the conditioning and coming up with the answer. It's impossible, which it is, but is it possible yet to be free of it? For moments at a time, maybe with expanding moments of awareness, which is not of the conditioning, it is unconditioned and unconditionable. Like the sky in which clouds float, but it is not touched by them, not moistened by them. The sun is not darkened by it, it's shining. You find it out with utter joy and amazement every time you take off in a jet. There it is, no matter how stormy and dark and cold miserable it was in the airport. Always miserable. No, they're not always miserable. Here we create our own world with our stories and imagination, don't we? Can that all be seen into in quiet sitting, learned about, be wise about, and compassionate? There's no place else to go, nothing else to attain, except simply being here in an innocent openness. And if it's not there, look at and listen to the obstacles, to all the bars of the prison. Yes, that's the beauty of discovering things that are in the way. That they don't have that same power once they have come into awareness. It's only what we are unconscious and unaware of that binds us, ties us, imprisons us, runs us, controls us. But in truth, that prison does not exist. And this pops up as a living truth for people who sit quietly, not even expecting it, not even looking for it. Here it is. I think I've talked enough about this now. We can pick it up in meetings, group and individual. We will end here for today.